Resident Evil. So far, wishing there was no residents in this evil. In Capcom's early years, they specialized in arcade games that were later ported over to consoles. Over on the Nintendo Entertainment System, Capcom would begin their console game development by porting over 1942 and Ghosts and Goblins and creating what some may call Capcom's mascot, Mega Man. Though Mega Man wasn't that successful, creator and director of Mega Man, Akira Kitamura, wanted to make more sequels, so he sought permission from the vice president of Capcom at the time to make more Mega Man games, as long as he and his team contributed to other projects. As Mega Man continued with more sequels, a horror game by the name of Sweet Home was developed by Capcom for the Family Computer in 1989. This was a Japanese exclusive game, as the game was based from a horror movie of the same name, a Japanese horror film where a camera crew searches for famous paintings that have gone missing. And depending on how the game is played, either all 5 or certain members of the camera crew can escape with their lives. This would serve as the inspiration for the Resident Evil series, which made its debut on the PlayStation 1 and was later ported to the Sega Saturn and surprisingly the DS, titled Deadly Silence. Hence the abbreviation of the DS for this title, Deadly Silence. Creative. This would be considered Capcom's biggest intellectual property alongside Street Fighter and eventually Monster Hunter. Resident Evil was regarded as defining the survival horror genre, spawning over multiple sequels, spin-offs, movies, and even reading material such as novels and comics. As Capcom began developing games for the PlayStation 2 and GameCube, they created quite possibly the most critically acclaimed title in the Resident Evil series, Resident Evil 4. This game practically needs no introduction, but for those who don't know, this is the game that most Resident Evil enthusiasts consider the best Resident Evil game. Praised for its story, gameplay, visuals, and changing the formula with an over-the-shoulder view. This is what I call the action era of Resident Evil, as Leon here can flip kick enemies and react to certain scenarios with button prompts. Just don't get caught off guard in the cutscenes. However, the series would deteriorate with Resident Evil 6, as this title was regarded as the low point for the series, as this title heavily focused on the action aspects rather than a healthy blend of action and survival horror. Compared to earlier titles in the series, Resident Evil 6 didn't reach desirable review scores and is generally mixed from players and fans. The Resident Evil series will go back to its roots in Resident Evil 7, as developers took inspiration from horror films, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Saw, and Evil Dead to be exact. This will begin a new chapter in the Resident Evil series with a new character, Ethan Winters, an ordinary man who was looking for his missing wife. Unlike the military personnel seen in previous games, Ethan was designed to be a new character that wasn't regarded as a superhero, similar to Leon Kennedy or Chris Redfield. Personally speaking, a character that's just ordinary is more of a good fit for survival horror. Not just because they're fragile when compared to someone that's military trained, but as a character that can be terrified themselves is more believable than someone who is, say, a police officer or a military personnel. That's not to say that those who are police can't be easily terrified, but I think ordinary people with not much experience in either hand-to-hand combat or agility are key components to not just survival horror, but horror in general. A person's greatest weapon for survival is their mind. Keeping one's wits about them is key to surviving almost any nightmare. And on the topic of vulnerability, Resident Evil 7 absolutely brings back horror with hardly any action as seen in previous titles. And this is made even better with the support of virtual reality with Resident Evil's demo Kitchen, spelled with the number 7. The VR capabilities will carry over to Village, Resident Evil 8, a sequel to Resident Evil 7 that apparently eased up on the horror, as Capcom wanted this entry to be more welcoming for people because Resident Evil 7 was too scary.
Resident Evil producer said in his latest interview included in a newsletter, Candace said Village's development team didn't want to frighten off players after some feedback suggested the game's predecessor was too scary. No! Oh, no, it wasn't. We wanted scary. That's exactly what we're striving for, so it's a huge compliment. But at the same time, it is always our goal to create something that anybody can feel comfortable jumping in and playing. No! So we eased up on the tension curve relative to Resident Evil 7 so that players aren't in constant fear. God dang it, that's not, no. Why are we trying to make Resident Evil for all ages?
Still, Village Resident Evil 8 was reviewed and sold well, so it wasn't a total loss. In fact, for people who thought this title had toned down horror, good news. But amongst the release of the new titles, Capcom was also hard at work remaking old Resident Evil games. For me personally, remakes are opportunities for games to not only look better than their original counterpart, but to establish quality improvements that can not only change the game but also improve it. Fixing even the tiniest problems is enough to make a huge difference, though it's not always perfect as changes aren't always acceptable. And in the case of Resident Evil, Capcom has done a graceful job bringing the older titles into a new light. Resident Evil 2 and 3 are PlayStation 1 games that are praised for atmosphere, improvements compared to the first game, and even introducing the critically acclaimed characters in the series, Leon Kennedy, Claire Redfield, brother Chris Redfield, and even Carlos. Remake Carlos is my personal favorite. So I figured that Capcom remade the old Resident Evil games that needed remakes the most. I mean, there's Resident Evil 0, Resident Evil Code Veronica, Dead Aim, Gaiden, and even the more polarizing titles in the series. Nope. I have been proven wrong. The next game that Capcom decided to remake was the critically acclaimed, universally praised, and dare I say most overrated Resident Evil game ever made, Resident Evil 4. Out of all the Resident Evil games they could have possibly remade, why this one? This is something I never comprehended, even to this day. Resident Evil 4 is considered the best of the best, so why remake this one as opposed to other titles that not only show their age and quality, but clearly need that same detail that one would find in Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes and even the first one. Especially when Capcom was worried that remaking Resident Evil 4 wasn't a good idea, though the result shows that remaking a critically acclaimed game can actually be successful. And I must admit, I do love how Ashley looks and acts in this game. I would go so far to say that remake Ashley is Ashley.
Sure you're all right? You're not burned, are you?
No, thanks for your help. I really did the trick.
Hey, Leon, there's some armor. Bet you could use it like a bulletproof vest.
Little old-fashioned for my taste.
Too bad. I think you'd look pretty dashing.
Have a seat.
So, you do a lot of missions like this?
Well, yeah, but I'm not used to having such good company.
Is that a compliment?
Take it however you want.
Skills. My hero. Nice catch.
You like thrill rides?
Thank you for saving me.
Don't mention it.
And yes, Resident Evil was remade on the GameCube with the HD port of this remake released in 2015, and it was reported that Resident Evil 1 would be remade again. So for Resident Evil 1 that first released on PlayStation 1 and later ported to the Sega Saturn and the DS titled Deadly Silence, was remade for the GameCube in 2002 and released again in HD in 2015, and it's reportedly getting remade again.
Don't ever do that again. Seriously.
But if that wasn't bad enough, the modern Resident Evil games, more specifically 7, was released for mobile devices. Resident Evil 2 Remake was re-released as an arcade game, more Resident Evil computer graphic movies were made, and another Resident Evil game was made, this time with the director of Resident Evil 7, Koshi Nakanishi. Now, I knew that at the end of Village Resident Evil 8 that there would be more games on the horizon that covers more of the lore, but I didn't imagine that the announcement for the next game would come so soon, which is where my irritation starts to reach its peak. After the announcement of Resident Evil Requiem, I basically just wanted Resident Evil to go on hiatus. The series has done more than enough, and it has filled Capcom's pockets with enough in the bank that'll make even Richie Rich blink. Capcom has released statement after statement about how many copies of the new games sold with gratitude expressed by developers or directors, and even Requiem received such high praise from critics, fans, general players, you name it. So with the success of Requiem and basically this act of Resident Evil drawing to a close, if you can call it that, is it finally time for Resident Evil to get the hiatus that it needs? Well, at least this one is finally getting a remake, but how long does Capcom plan to keep up with this? I would imagine that the remakes would cease after Code Veronica and 0 were remade, but after the 4 remake was released, Capcom asked the unfortunate question of which Resident Evil game people wanted to see remade next. Personally, I just wanted Capcom to just put Resident Evil away. Just give it a break and work on other franchises than have it a game in years, if not decades. Nope. I was proven wrong yet again. Capcom is going all in with Resident Evil as they want to release a new Resident Evil game every year. This also includes remakes because, according to Masachika Kawada, one of the reasons for creating remakes is producing a new entry in the Resident Evil series every year would be quite an undertaking and a difficult task. So being able to revisit older games and remake them helps Capcom meet the goal of releasing a Resident Evil title each year, but it also allows the team to continually challenge themselves and hone their craft. That's not to say their remakes are any less important. In fact, they're just as important as the mainline titles. Capcom is lucky enough to have found this cycle that can continue to provide us with the financial resources to create things like new entries in the Resident Evil series and completely new IP like Pragmata. So there is that relationship there. I will praise Capcom for delivering high-quality games as of late, whether it be Monster Hunter, Street Fighter, or even their new IPs. But what I've been seeing for the most part is Resident Evil getting all this attention to detail, all the careful planning, and making games that not only play well and look well, but they also get the recognition, praise, and rewards that it rightfully deserves. After all, I can see that this series was looked after and cared for by people who clearly care about the series, front and back. But that's just for Resident Evil. Late last year, Capcom reported that they're constructing a new studio to focus on underutilized IPs. And even though I don't have my hopes up, I can at least look forward to the end result because Capcom absolutely has so many underutilized IPs that needs the same treatment that Resident Evil is getting. New games, remakes, movies, even anniversary celebrations because Capcom was going so far deep down that rabbit hole to celebrate Resident Evil's 30th anniversary. Again, I praise Capcom for releasing high quality titles that are fun and interesting, but they still have other franchises that desperately need that dust off. And no, I'm not counting Dino Crisis because that to me is just Resident Evil with dinosaurs, though I will admit Regina is attractive. Red hairs are my weakness. Older Capcom franchises such as Power Stone, Final Fight, and other Capcom IPs I can't list on top of my head still has so much dust on them that could benefit from getting a revival, either a new game or a remake of some sort. Even Devil May Cry and Ace Attorney were listed as underutilized IPs that this new studio was built for. And of course, Mega Man.
Not again.
You knew this was coming, so don't even try. In the beginning, Mega Man was all about a fighting robot fighting other fighting robots. As the series garnered multiple sequels back in the day, it wasn't exactly a console seller like Mario or Sonic and eventually Crash Bandicoot. With new consoles releasing, so too were new Mega Man series. Sure, the classic series was the face of the Mega Man series, no matter how hard you looked. Other sequel series and spin-offs would take the helm as the new Mega Man. Mega Man X on the Super Nintendo, Mega Man Legends on PlayStation, and later Mega Man Zero and Battle Network on Game Boy Advance. There was basically too much here with fans growing ties with their favorite Mega Man and critics growing wary and downright just wanting the series to either go on a break or just die.
Wait, what? Another Mega Man game? Oh, for sake. Why don't you just shove a pencil up my urethra so I can get it over with? God, I hate these games.
With Keiji Inafune leaving Capcom in 2010 and Kazuhiro Tsuchiya leaving in 2023, the Mega Man series was left with no one to manage it. It wasn't until the announcement of Mega Man Dual Override that the Mega Man series finally got a new game after shamelessly adding Mega Man X in Minecraft, adding Mega Man in Brawlhalla, and wondering what to do with the Mega Man series as a whole, as Capcom claimed they want Mega Man to be continuous on an ongoing basis and trying to come up with new ideas. Managing a franchise is never easy, but it shows that there's some care and consideration. So at least there's some thought put into how the series can continue. In fact, I congratulate Capcom for acknowledging that Mega Man at least needs the remake treatment, even if that was listed in their election survey. But I would go to argue that Mega Man needs the attention that Resident Evil has now. Remaking old games so that all the issues are addressed in addition to improving the games overall and new games that expand not just the lore of the series, but also game mechanics and gameplay. And I'm mostly referring to the classic X, Zero, and ZX series as I have more experience with those entries in particular. And while Classic and X did have remakes, but they were only PSP exclusives. Powered Up and Mario Hunter X are the only Mega Man remakes ever made by Capcom, with few exceptions to the rule. The other games were added together in collections with hardly any improvements to speak of, which is why I gave the Legacy Collection such a hard time. Repackaged games with little to no improvement. You're better off emulating the games in question with ROM hacks that improves them. Unless the fans pitch in to improve the games or make new games to fill the void, that's it. Without the respected talents that know what Mega Man is and how to manage it, it's painfully obvious that the Mega Man series would be collecting dust for a long time. And it was understandable that that was the case, as Resident Evil was getting new games, remakes, and movies, with the new one set to premiere in September of this year. My irritation of this series grew exponentially. I don't flat out hate Resident Evil, as I think it's a franchise that is very successful and handled well, but for franchises that I personally like and seeing other franchises not getting anything as of late, this is what led to me becoming not just irritated Resident Evil, but just frustrated. And to further enhance the frustration, Capcom wants Mega Man to reach a broader audience, with Capcom disclosing at a shareholders meeting. The Mega Man series is an important IP that will mark its 40th anniversary in 2027. Beyond our announcement at the end of last year that a new title in the series, Mega Man Dual Override, is scheduled for release in 2027, we will continue working to communicate the appeal of the series to an even broader audience, including through merchandise initiatives. As for me personally, this has to be more than just figures and comics, because Mega Man is a video game franchise first, multimedia adaptations later. But if Capcom can have the creative talent needed to produce a large quantity of Resident Evil titles, then the same should be said with not just Mega Man but other older Capcom IPs that aren't getting anything as of late. Which is why I have my sights set on the new studio that's currently under construction that's set to begin operating in 2027, because even though we're basically witnessing an impending game crash because of all the greed, hubris, and asinine business decisions, Capcom has proven time and time again that despite these miserable times, they're still able to create games that people can enjoy, which I think is important. But what I'm seeing most from Capcom is Resident Evil. And to be honest, it's getting difficult to hold in the frustration, because if Resident Evil can have this much attention to detail, then this can also be accomplished in other Capcom properties. Mega Man especially, because people view this as Capcom's equivalent to Nintendo's Mario or Sega's Sonic the Hedgehog. Resident Evil is a good franchise, but one I personally didn't grow up with and only saw a decent portion of the movies. But Mega Man was the series that I started with, alongside Mario, Zelda, and even Blaster Master. And seeing this franchise not getting what it needs, especially when Capcom wants the series to reach a broader audience, is just frustrating. And when the fans are picking up the slack, that should be evident enough that Capcom, without the right people to run this series, isn't ready. So until the new studio opens and Capcom finds the right people for the job, I don't see the Mega Man series or any other old Capcom IP making a healthy comeback anytime soon. I'm looking forward to how Dual Override performs, but worried what will happen afterwards. But until then, Resident Evil as far as the eye can see, and for me, that's irritating. It's understandable why Capcom continues to pump out Resident Evil games, but it still needs a hiatus, because constantly seeing this franchise get all this attention gets under my skin. Either the series goes on a hiatus after a successful lineup of games, or Capcom sticks true to their word and continues to pump out more titles faster than any evil organization can pump out viruses and create their own BOWs. Or they can just turn into a dinosaur monster, I don't know. And as always, thank you all for seeing or listening to this all the way through, and feel free to share what Capcom franchise you want to see have the same love and care that Resident Evil is getting. And also, please share this with your friends, family, and anyone else that may find this video informative, entertaining, or maybe you needed something to fall asleep to. I can relate. And I also discuss more about Capcom's problematic handling with Mega Man and other videos you can check out as well. Here's hoping that the 40th anniversary of Mega Man is actually worth the damn, and that Resident Evil can finally be laid to rest. God, this series pisses me off. Holy shit.